Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast. NFL preview season is in full swing. 3 divisions down and another on the docket today as we shift our gears from the very competitive AFC North into the NFC North and a potential changing of the guard as far as odds makers are concerned. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, with every podcast we knock down, we are one step closer to the start of the NFL regular season.
Yeah, and we wrap up today. We are at the halfway point, and this is also a hotly contested division, maybe not for the same reasons the previous division we discussed is.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have a bona fide Super Bowl contender in this division the same way when we spoke so glowingly last week about the AFC North, but that's not going to stop us from unpacking a lot of these teams.
I don't know. The Midwest region believes they have a potential two potential Super Bowl contenders.
Well, not only that, and a potential MVP that's generating plenty of buzz as far as the betting markets are concerned. But, you know, when it comes to the first weekend of preseason, I mean, are you in the office? Are you watching preseason football from start to finish, trying to make sure you're updating your depth charts? Because there's nothing that says spending a quality time on a Friday night like watching David Blau lead the 2-minute drill with a subsequent 2-point conversion.
It's certainly on in the background as we're doing some work. Yes. It's good to have football back. Still a little unfamiliar with the whole YouTube TV sham that's going on here. But I was told I was going to get every game. Nope, you got to go to NFL.com and get NFL Plus to get all of the preseason games.
You'll get every game when the regular season starts. I still haven't made the plunge yet. Have no idea if my TVs are capable of being able to stream those, what it's like to change channels. But I think that just goes to show it dates us more than anything else, where all the next generation goes, streaming is the way to go. I go, the last thing I want is my internet to go down on a Sunday, because I like to keep my cool most days. Wins and losses we know come and go. But if we lose connectivity in any capacity, I will not be a happy camper, to say the least, for all the bad things that I'm able to say about DirecTV over the years.
I was going to let you finish your thought, and I wasn't sure we were going to mesh. But yes, you realize, boy, might be getting a little bit older when this technology thing is a little bit of a hurdle for even me.
Hey, you always say it's never going to happen. You remember 15, 18 years ago, and you go, that's not going to be me. And then lo and behold, Father Time remains undefeated, smacks you in the head, and you remember how old you really are. But you know what? With age comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes experience. And when we talk about all of those things, we can dive right into the division, and we can start with the Chicago Bears that are generating all sorts of buzz. When we look at the Bears betting markets early on, this is a team whose win total is 7.5 shaded to the over, a far cry from where they finished last year in the wins-loss column. Plus 425 to win the division, which does have that in long shots in the North. Don't tell that to anybody out there that lives on the banks of Lake Michigan. You're looking at them at 19-1 to win the NFC and 47-1 or thereabouts to win the Super Bowl. And this was a Bears team that lost their final 10 games last year and went winless in the division. GM Ryan Poles traded out of the top spot to acquire draft capital, and they went out and made a concerted effort to bring in a bona fide number 1 wide receiver in DJ Moore, who looked Payne like the greatest thing since sliced bread, catching a ball that was grossly underthrown behind the line of scrimmage against the Titans over the weekend and dancing into the end zone. Cap space is obviously on the Bears side, but this is the year they have to begin climbing out of the league cellar and making a step in the right direction. Poles had to eat $93 million in dead cap last season, was the most in league history, but as a result, they finished with the second worst ATS record in the league. Payne, people tell me I'm overly critical when we talk about the Chicago Bears and who they believe their franchise quarterback is under center. I kind of took a jab at the top, knowing how much buzz Justin Fields is creating in the MVP market, but I feel that's the most logical place to start, knowing that he wasn't the quarterback that this regime drafted, but he's a man that they've shown the utmost confidence in, knowing that they could have taken a player like Bryce Young had they not traded the number 1 pick this offseason.
Continuing our theme before we got into business, the older you get, the quicker time flies. So it shocks me that we're already in year 3 for Justin Fields. It feels like he was just drafted like last year. Bears fans are treating Fields like a foregone conclusion. He's their franchise quarterback for the next decade, like Mahomes or Lamar or Burrow, Allen, Hurts, or Herbert. And to me, if this doesn't work in year 3, I think you said it perfectly. Like Ryan Poles, who didn't draft Fields, probably takes another quarterback in 2024, brings in some kind of competition, whether it's through the draft or a veteran. I'm not saying Fields is completely gone at that point, but I think you have to bring another guy into that room. And, I kind of get when you win 3 games, the organization needs to provide a glimmer of hope, right? Something you can hold on to in the offseason. So all of the manufactured runs for Fields to break a rushing record is nice, but to me, it's not reality. You even just go back to that last game of the season. You run for 132 yards in the final game, but you lose to a division rival that didn't make the playoffs by 31 points. Like, that's not progress to me. And I don't really think this is sustainable long term, right? His style. We all love mobile quarterbacks. Quarterback runs are the most efficient play, but it feels like there's this risk reward of time and place. If you look at Justin Fields, 160 carries last season. Cam Newton never eclipsed 140 in a regular season, and Cam Newton 6'5", 250 pounds. Justin Fields 6'2", 225. Cam Newton's career was effectively over at age 29. So it's very clear Justin Fields has to grow as a passer, and I think maybe Bears fans are having deja vu right now because the last time Chicago had a young quarterback heading into year 3 and everyone was excited, we were the podcast responsible of breaking the news that Santa Claus isn't real. And
that doesn't make you very popular, let me tell you that much.
Among your friend base there in Chicago?
Amongst others. Friend base, radio listenership, and everyone else who always says I'm a wet blanket when it comes to Chicago sports, because clearly they've had so much to celebrate with the Blackhawks, Bulls, and Bears over the last 5 to 7 years.
I mean, Mitchell Trubisky's passing data through 2 seasons makes him look like Dan Marino in his prime compared to Justin Fields. And
scary to think about.
It won't be difficult for Fields to improve as a passer because you simply can't get worse, right? If you just, Fields has to improve by a sizable amount. There were 34 quarterbacks last season that threw at least 200 passes. Justin Fields was dead last in defense-adjusted value over average. Fields was 12% worse than the second worst quarterback. And his value as a passer was 34% below average. That was actually regression from his rookie season where Fields was 28% below average. You look at some of the numbers and Fields saw his big-time throw rate dip year over year. Turnover-worthy plays increased. His ADOT dipped more than half a yard. And I think the real concerning part was defenses loaded the box on Chicago last season. Stop the ground game, right? Stop Fields before he starts. And that means fewer bodies in coverage, more throwing windows for Fields. On first down, Fields saw loaded boxes 71% of the time, 10% higher than league average. On second down, 65% loaded boxes. That was 15% higher than league average. Defenses were daring Justin Fields to beat them with his arm, and he couldn't. And the knock on Fields in college, he was a one-read quarterback. And, for quarterback that's a threat to run every time, you think about what the job of a defender is, right? Can't leave your feet, got to stay down, can't bite on pump fakes, right? Can't tackle if your feet are in the air. Somehow, Fields had 11 passes batted. So it just tells you defensive linemen knew where Fields was going with the football, and they were locking in on some tendencies. But I think there's some positives, right, for Justin Fields, right? We know he's a worker, got all the talent in the world to get better, good deep ball passer, and it looks like Luke Getsy is at least doing things, which we just saw in the preseason and everyone's raving about, he's at least getting Fields a little bit more acclimated to some short passes, gain some confidence, right? Short, intermediate, wide receiver screens. That's good to see. Let's see if Justin Fields can actually execute it, right? You kind of joked at the top with the DJ Moore touchdown yesterday. Certainly you're not going to be facing second and third stringers on defense, but even with that wide receiver screen, you look at it, it's an inaccurate pass, right? It's low, it's outside, right? DJ Moore isn't going to be able to catch a ball that's inaccurate and low 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage and run 70 yards untouched against, NFL caliber defenses with their starters out there. But it's at least good to see they're creating easier throws for Justin Fields. I think everything around Justin Fields is better this season. DJ Moore might not have all the measurables, but he's extremely quick and athletic, and we saw yesterday can make plays after the catch. He's a legit downfield threat. DJ Moore's ability to separate is elite. On over 70% of his career targets, DJ Moore created at least one step of separation. And I kind of go back to what we talked about last year. It's similar to A.J. Brown being elite in the areas where Jalen Hurts had struggled prior to last season. DJ Moore excels in the areas Justin Fields has been poor, right? Because DJ Moore can separate so quickly, that's going to help Fields in that intermediate throw game, which has been horrific. And Justin Fields hasn't been good or a willing passer over the middle. DJ Moore made really poor Carolina Panther quarterbacks look great in that area. And then for a mobile guy, Justin Fields has been, tragically bad when pressured. And if you look at DJ Moore since his rookie year, he's top 10 in targets when his quarterback is pressured. So all of the areas that Justin Fields has been deficient in, DJ Moore has been really good. Darnell Mooney's health should improve, and he can kind of get back to being that number 2 receiver, which he seems better suited to be. Earlier this summer, the Bears organization kind of voiced its frustration with Chase Claypool's work ethic and maturity, dealing with a hamstring injury right now, but there's very few receivers that run 4.4 at 6'4" and have this massive catch radius because of an 80-inch wingspan, and that's pretty much the Bears' either 2B or third option. I mean, Chase Claypool is only 25. He just has a ton of talent. The Bears also project to face a bottom 10 schedule of passing defenses. So no excuses. Justin Fields has the opportunity to improve. Would be impossible not to improve. Let's just see how far that leap is. Offensive line sounds like it's still an issue if you've done some reading. Last season it was talent deficient, and then the cohesion rate was 31st in the NFL. And that led Chicago to being dead last in pass protection efficiency. That was, effectively a combination of Fields holding on to the ball for nearly 3.5 seconds per drop back and being indecisive, along with that poor O-line play. Records were set, Todd. Right?
Not in a positive manner by any stretch. Spoiler alert, Bears fans.
46% pressure rate and the highest sack rate allowed in NFL history, a tick below 15%. You kind of look at how this plays out this year. You have Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Cody White here all return left to center. Each are better run blockers than pass protectors. Chicago signed Nate Davis to play right guard in free agency. He's dinged up a little bit right now, and then Chicago drafted Darnell Wright with the 10th pick. We've had our reservations about Darnell Wright. I hope he turns out to be a fantastic right tackle. He's really played one respectable season at the college level when they kicked him to right tackle. That system in Tennessee makes offensive linemen appear better than they are because the ball comes out so quick, right? Only 15% of dropbacks for the Vols last season were greater than 3 steps. It was the lowest rate in college football. So, being a great pass protector in that system metrically doesn't really translate great. I think some of the saving grace appears to be schedule again. The defensive lines that the Bears are going to face project to be bottom 10 in pass rush efficiency. I think the Bears O-line is really good moving people. I shouldn't say really good. Better than pass protecting, that's for sure. Yeah, Chicago is above average in run block win rate and line yards created. It projects that way again. Khalil Herbert is, pretty unsung running back, elusive, averaged nearly 3.7 yards per rush after first contact, finished third in defense adjusted value over average among all qualifying backs. And overall, again, Chicago faces one of the 5 easiest schedules of defenses. So when I look at this, it's like, got to show significant improvement. It's not just like getting incrementally better here. There just are no excuses because you got to find out what Justin Fields is. He has all the weapons around him. We didn't even mention Cole Kmet, who I like, wouldn't have paid $58 million to.
Yeah, that almost felt
nice
like a move just
end.
to get them to the cap floor, given how front-loaded that particular deal is.
What's weird is you start to look at Ryan Poles and you see the organizations he's coming from, and certainly he's done a good job bringing in some talent and acquiring some draft capital, and we know the money that he has to spend, and people have been like, why aren't you spending more? To me, the Bears were so far below the rest of the league, the rest of this division. I felt like you wanted to build this a little bit slower. Right? Provide some type of growth that gives you longevity. Going out and effectively blowing your wad in one off season, spending all the draft capital to move up and spending all the dollars on guys. I understand we got to get some pieces around Justin Fields, but this to me is the long game, and you start to look at where that capital and funds were spent. It's like, we're bringing in 2 linebackers, we're signing tight ends that are average to big deals. I don't know. I haven't loved the spend allocation quite yet, but Chicago does have a ton of money left.
Yeah, we'll figure out exactly some of the moves that they make going forward. You highlighted Chase Claypool and where he slots in terms of the pecking order for the Bears. Why that's so important? Because the Steelers have a man that everyone is raving about in George Pickens that the Bears could have drafted, probably at a reduced price compared to what they paid in terms of draft capital to bring Claypool in, hoping that they could resurrect his career there. But for all the things with the Bears offense and Justin Fields, what he can do going forward in his 3rd season, the defense last year in Chicago was an abject disaster. And as a result, the group could feature as many as 6 new starters. When you look at some of the counting metrics there, they finish at the bottom of the league or close to it in a lot of those categories. Last in scoring, last in sacks, 31st in rushing defense, created a league-low pressure rate, and did not upgrade significantly along the defensive line when it comes to generating natural pressure. You mentioned some of the high-priced free agents they bring in. TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds. Edwards is a local kid, thrilled to be back, playing in Chicago, trying to continue that tradition that the Bears have at linebacker. DeMarcus Walker's brought over from the Tennessee Titans to help with the ailing pass rush. They bring in Yannick Ngakoue on a short-term deal as well. Maybe one of the more unheralded pieces that they brought that doesn't generate headlines but should help in the run-stuffing capabilities is Andrew Billings to provide a big body in the middle of the line. But Payne, when we look at some of the holdovers, other than a piece or two in the secondary, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot to be excited about for Chicago, even going through the rebuilding pains that they suffered through last year. And I'm not quite sure that this defense is going to take a massive step year over year, given how much they struggled for stretches a season ago.
Yeah, you're kind of continuing my thought there on Ryan Poles. Like, I liked how he created some of the draft capital and got debt off the books. Effectively, you had terrible contracts of a lot of defensive players. So he went out and traded, Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith and moved on from Akeem Hicks. Those all make a world of sense when you think about building a team long term. And then, at the same time, the Bears faced the 2nd most difficult schedule of offenses. So it was going to be an uphill battle last year. There's no doubt about that. But you hire a defensive-minded head coach in Matt Eberflus, and it's kind of a tough sell when you're the 2nd worst defense in efficiency since 2016. That's how bad that Bears defense was last year. And then, you're in a passing league. You face the number 1 schedule of passing offenses. You can't be 31st in pressure rate and dead last in sacks. So that was a little wake-up call for some of those young kids in the secondary who weren't getting help from the defensive line. And you kind of combine all of these things. That's how you end up dead last in EPA per dropback allowed in the league. I don't see much talent up front, to your point. The starting rotation is basically veteran guys that haven't proven to have high ceilings in recent years. And then young guys still developing is basically the depth guys. DeMarcus Walker, Yannick Ngakoue, Justin Jones, you mentioned Andrew Billings. That appears to be the first 4. I love DeMarcus Walker, FSU guy. But he's a tweener, right? He's a tweener. Never been a full-time starter in his 6 seasons. Being asked to do that now. To Walker's credit, he registered an 11% pressure rate on pass rush snaps the last 2 seasons. He's coming off his best year. This, will be Ngakoue's 6th team since 2019 declining play. The 22 sacks the last 2 seasons certainly land you the deals, but he's a liability doing everything else. And, you look at this the last couple seasons in totality, like he just has not been very good in his last 1,600 snaps, and just basically graded out below replacement level. Justin Jones has had 1 good season of production in 5 years. This will be Andrew Billings' 4th team in 4 seasons. He is a plus run defender. That's what they're bringing him in to do. Finish 7th in run stop win rate among defensive tackles. So that's a good get. He's got a trait, right? Then it looks like both Jervon Dexter and Zach Pickens going to get burned this season as part of that interior line rotation. Trevis Gibson appears on his way to being cut. He was 4th string defensive end. I know he had a game yesterday. We'll see how that unfolds. Dominic Robinson, a 5th rounder out of Miami, Ohio, and Rasheem Green are the backup edge defenders. Not good to this point in their careers. There's some rumblings among Bears fans that Jadeveon Clowney could be signed. I will say
Why?
this.
Why?
Well, because it's a 1-year deal, so it doesn't really matter. Right, that's the same thing with Yannick Ngakoue, right? We're going to sign these 1-year deals. We're going to pay him $8, $9, $10 million. They become mercenaries. We hope that they can help us improve, but they don't kill our cap situation long term. So that's the vibe there, is that they're trying to reach out to him. But my understanding is, if Jadeveon Clowney were to end up on the Bears, it's because the first 3 options didn't pan out. He visited Baltimore. Baltimore presented him a contract. I don't believe he liked it, voiced it, and now took another visit elsewhere this weekend. So we'll see if this unfolds. If Clowney ends up in Chicago, it's because the other options didn't end up bearing fruit that he hoped they had. You kind of look, again, in this first full offseason, Brian Poles spends big at linebacker. A little bit of a red flag there. Tremaine Edmonds got $50 million guaranteed, was below replacement level linebacker in 4 of his 5 seasons in Buffalo for a very good defensive-minded coach. Edmonds a little bit dinged up right now, but apparently on track to play week 1. Let's monitor that. I do like TJ Edwards, less than $8 million guaranteed. He just wins with smarts, right? Positioning and diagnosing and knowing where to be. Has great field. He's coming off his best season in every single season, has been above replacement level. The secondary has some talent, right? I mean, Eddie Jackson's back for season 7. Had 2 down years, but returned to form last year. Gave up 6 yards per target with 4 picks and just 1 penalty allowed. Jalen Johnson is serviceable. Hasn't quite made that move to very, very dependable, shutdown corner status. And then the 2 young kids Chicago drafted last season with Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker are there. I'll be honest, Kyler Gordon got picked on. You saw offensive coordinators and quarterbacks said, that's the guy we're attacking. And Gordon allowed 82% of targets to be caught. 131 cornerbacks played at least 250 snaps last season. Gordon graded out number 127. He allowed quarterbacks to have a 111 rating when they threw at him. Only one direction to go this season. I like Jaquan Brisker. I think he's got real potential. He was thrown into the fire, played nearly 1,000 snaps as a rookie against a great schedule of passing offenses, somehow played above replacement level. Should be fun to see his improvement in year 2. The overall talent just isn't great on defense, but there's a lot of saving graces here, right? The Bears face a below-average schedule of offenses this season. We're still projecting a bottom 8 type defense, but I think that's massive improvement when you think about being the worst defense since 2016 last year. Getting to below average in that 16 to 25 range, somewhere in there would be a really, really good season. And I think obviously if you're at the top of that projection, then all of a sudden maybe you start to flirt with the playoffs if Justin Fields makes that progress. But I think our sentiment is the same here, Todd. It's there's a lot of hype for Fields in Chicago this season. You mentioned him taking the most MVP bets. I think it's pretty clear the Bears are improved, and we've said multiple times this offseason that the NFC is so weak relative to the AFC. A surprise team is going to emerge. But I think the market understands the Bears are improved, right? Won 3 games last year. Pythag said it should have been 5. Current market price 7.7 wins. And I mean, Chicago wasn't necessarily close last season. You just even look down the stretch, there wasn't this improvement that would leave you brimming with hope and optimism this year. They covered one of their final 8 games, and that kind of depicts like the guys with the very most to lose, right? Pro bettors and odds makers couldn't price the Bears properly enough. I mean, Chicago lost 5 games last year by 20-plus points. So it's tough for me to be like, hey, I want to invest in this team right now. It feels like the market fully understands that the Bears are improved, and now we potentially could be getting to a point where they're a little bit overvalued here, unless Justin Fields makes this enormous leap, and then because the quarterback position's so vital, Bears fans are happy with them exceeding expectations. It's just like, they won 3 games last year. To get over their win total this year, you got to win 8. It's a massive leap.
Well, one thing I can tell you is that Bears fans will be overly exuberant if they're able to get a season-opening victory against the Green Bay Packers, or the naysayers will come out in full force if Justin Fields struggles against a division rival when we see them on full display on September 10th when their season kicks off. When we look elsewhere as far as the landscape of the NFC North, the Detroit Lions, for the first time in an eternity, are division favorites, a shade better than even money if you want to bet them to win the whole thing there. Their win total, 9.5, inching ever so close to that 10 threshold. And when you look at their odds to win the NFC and the Super Bowl, first time in I don't know how long that they're priced under 10-1 to win the conference and priced under 20-1 to have their name engraved on the Lombardi Trophy. The thing is, for the Lions, they're trying to work against a little bit of history. And Dan Campbell was 4-19-1 as a head coach in Detroit before this team finished white hot down the stretch, going 8-2. They were listed as an underdog in all 17 games as recently as 2 seasons ago. They did finish back in 2021 with an 11-6 ATS mark, saying that they were a little bit undervalued in the betting market, and followed it up last year as point spread darlings as well. This is a group that's now covered nearly 70% of their games over the last 2 seasons, something that's not supposed to happen in the NFL, where we talk about the betting markets being the models of efficiency, but they still are looking to win their first division title since 1993. Payne, they have never won a division since we've gone to this 4-division format. That's how long it's been in the Motor City for them to get the Honolulu Blue to sit atop the pecking order. They did deal with a ton of missed games due to injury last year. Positive regression should work in their favor. This was a team that went 9-1 when they won the turnover battle and 0-6 when they lost it. No team's results in the entire NFL are more closely tied to turnovers than the Lions. One of the biggest coups was that the Lions were able to retain their offensive coordinator in Ben Johnson, who did an outstanding job getting the most out of Jared Goff. This is a group that finished 5th last year in points per game, and if he has a season like he did last year, he'll be one of the hottest names in the coaching market. Goff, 29 touchdowns and just 7 interceptions last year, finished the season on a stretch of 17 touchdowns to 1 pick. And when we look at this Lions team offensively, there are pieces to like, but at the same time, Payne, I don't want to sit here and throw cold water. I look at that receiving room, and there are some major red flags, especially this group going into the season with Jamison Williams out the first 6 games. After Amon-Ra St. Brown, there could be some challenges for Jared Goff to replicate the effort we saw last season.
Well, I'm going to say this because I'm a little bit more optimistic on the offensive side than what you presented there. And I think aside from earning for our listeners, the most rewarding part of these, at least for me, and they are extremely labor-intensive previews, we'll put it that way, is identifying things before they happen. And last season, we were extremely bullish on Ben Johnson, and dozens of DMs and emails from Lions fans came through saying we were the only guys hyping Ben Johnson before last season. If you remember and you go back to 2021, Ben Johnson was promoted to passing game coordinator midseason after Anthony Lynn was fired. And Ben was basically responsible for designing receiver route concepts, and he was coordinating the pass game every week. And the sample size was small, but the results were so glaring, you couldn't ignore them. And so you go back to the first 8 games of that 2021 season with Anthony Lynn running the offense. First 3 quarters, Detroit was 31st in passing efficiency, and Jared Goff was 29th out of 33 qualifiers in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. But once Ben Johnson took over the passing game in week 9, Detroit was 7th in passing efficiency from that point forward. Jared Goff improved to 9th out of 35 qualifying quarterbacks in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. Then last season, Dan Campbell put more on Ben Johnson's plate, right? Made him the offensive coordinator, made him the play caller. He was running the entire show. And Detroit finished 5th in schedule-adjusted offensive efficiency, 5th in passing efficiency, 6th in EPA per play. Jared Goff was once again QB 9 out of 37 qualifying QBs in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. And the kicker here is Ben Johnson was able to do that with the 5th most injured offense. So it was really, really impressive. My feeling is if you have another season like that, unfortunately for Lions fans, Ben Johnson's going to be a head coach somewhere. That's just my vibe if he pulls this off again. But you're heading into this season, I think the offensive prospects look even better on paper. Detroit projects to face a bottom 5 schedule of defenses, which is great because Jared Goff has a clear performance ceiling. You can see that in the individual metrics that only focus on Goff and not including the team, right? Like 22 quarterbacks drop back to pass at least 400 times last season. Goff was 13th in passing grade. Of those same 22 quarterbacks, only Geno Smith was more fortunate in turnover-worthy plays that didn't result in an actual turnover. Jared Goff committed 24 turnover-worthy plays, but only threw 7 interceptions. And then you look at how Goff did against top 10 defenses. The Lions played a bunch, 6 of them last year, but Goff was in the 24th percentile of quarterback performance against top 10 defenses. So undoubtedly, like, Goff can run the Lions offense. He's been better than I think any of us projected after that trade, including the entire coaching staff and people in that Lions building. And Goff and the Lions offense have a cupcake schedule of defenses this season. But when we kind of start assessing the Lions through, the prism of division favorite, large favorite to make the playoffs, I don't know if a Lions team that's led by Jared Goff is kind of ready to compete against some of the big boys. Certainly what's around Goff. You mentioned the receiver group. I think, in totality, everything around him is a little bit better, right? You look at what he has up front, offensive line. It's going to be a top 5 unit if they stay healthy. Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, that's a great tackle tandem. Frank Ragnow is an upper-tier center. Jonah Jackson played through injury late last season. You could see his numbers trail off the final 5 games by a wide margin, so getting him 100% helps. Vaitai at right guard never played a snap last season after needing back surgery. Let's see how healthy Vaitai is, but Detroit brought in, a familiar face with Graham Glasgow as an insurance policy. It looks like Glasgow may actually start at right guard. So this is a very good offensive line. Running back room has different faces, but matching skill sets. I mean, David Montgomery's going to play the Jamal Williams role, physical between the tackle runner, short yardage, goal line. He actually was better than Williams last year when you look at value over average running back. I know the numbers weren't the same, but in terms of efficiency, it was a little bit better. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to play the DeAndre Swift role, but hopefully a healthier version. And certainly Gibbs has more juice in the passing game, especially downfield. And then you think about Jared Goff, like it's vital that you have that check down security blanket because Goff, 62% of his passes were 9 yards or shorter last year. The big question is what you hit on, right? The pass catching unit. It's a little bit of a question mark past Amon-Ra. You look at St. Brown, right? Literally transformed from really good rookie to fantastic year 2.
Dude's a horse.
I mean, it was an elite season. Let's just kind of put it that way. Over 2.4 yards per route run while running 60% of routes from the slot. It really impressive, especially when you think about that's kind of the key guy defensive coordinators would game plan for to remove from the game. Amon-Ra St. Brown, number 2 among all wide receivers in route win rate, 7th in elusiveness, so a great yak guy. Clearly St. Brown's Goff's guy, right? 30% target rate per route run. It was number 2 in the NFL. I think the hope is, right, Jameson Williams heading into his sophomore season, another year removed from the ACL injury, becomes the perfect complement to St. Brown. Just, this blazing deep threat. It's been a little bit inconsistent. We saw a drop downfield this week in the preseason game. We obviously know he's suspended for the first 6. So you're relying on this mix of veterans that are trying to pick up the slack until Williams returns, right? You have Khalif Raymond coming off his best year as a pro, 1.9 yards per route run. Josh Reynolds, and then they brought back Marvin Jones Jr. It's not an above-league average room until Jameson Williams returns and consistently provides what everybody else in this room does not have, and that is elite downfield speed. But if Jameson Williams uses this 6 weeks to kind of refine his game a little bit and continue to get healthier, the room takes a leap, especially if Amon-Ra plays to the same level. And then you have Laporta, who apparently is just absolutely crushing it in camp. He's a horse. The Lions are designing stuff specifically for Laporta. He's going to be a day one starter at tight end. They think they absolutely hit a home run with that draft pick.
Look, you mentioned the draft, and we knew that they drew criticism because they overdrafted a couple of guys, at least on paper. You mentioned Laporta. Sometimes there can be a learning curve at the tight end position, but we know when you come out of Iowa, obviously they've had success with tight ends projecting at the next level. We'll see if Laporta can be the next in that line. Jahmyr Gibbs, of course, went 12th overall. We'll see exactly how they utilize him, to your point, talking about the DeAndre Swift role, not just a runner between the tackles, but also catching balls out of the backfield. But they also drafted, Jack Campbell a little bit earlier than people expected, which provides a nice segue to discuss Aaron Glenn's defense. And for the first time in what feels like ages, it looks like Detroit may have some actual real depth on defense. And for those people that want to look at the entire season, there's a lot of noise in those numbers because it's a group that finished last in total defense and 28th in scoring defense, allowed a league high 22 plus first downs per game and the second most points per drive. But you look at how the group performed that coincided with them protecting the football offensively and getting themselves into the thick of things in the playoff race. They look to be a lot more buttoned up, and with an offense that's explosive, look, they didn't have to be the 85 Bears defensively. They just couldn't be a bottom unit, and they made massive steps in a positive manner given some of the productivity that we saw over the last 6 to 8 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, so we hit on that improvement pretty much immediately last year when we were breaking down Lions games week to week. I think, when you listen to Aaron Glenn, he's cognizant of the hype surrounding the team. He basically came out point blank and said, it's time to get over the hump. And we saw that real improvement down the stretch where, you look dead last by a mile the first 8 weeks in schedule-adjusted defensive efficiency. Dead last in EPA per play allowed. Detroit was literally giving up a shade less than 0.2 points per play. Nobody else was giving up even half that the first 8 weeks last season. But you mentioned some of that improvement. It actually started week 9 and continued onward. The offense stopped turning the ball over, to your point, and Detroit improved to a below-average defense in both schedule-adjusted efficiency and EPA per play surrendered. Aaron Glenn also made some changes to his coverages. Young guys up front started to get a little bit more comfortable. Aiden Hutchinson had his 4 best games of the season after week 10. You start to look ahead to this season. The schedule of passing offenses the Lion face projects to be bottom 10 in the league, so that's nice. Detroit spent money in draft capital to improve the secondary. The splash signing was Cam Sutton. $11 million a year is probably an overpay, but Sutton allowed 50% of targets to be caught last season and a 69 passer rating when targeted. Jerry Jacobs right now is the leader in the clubhouse to win the cornerback 2 job. Meh. Undrafted free agent with slightly below replacement level play the first 2 seasons. Brian Branch, the rookie second rounder out of Alabama, is winning the slot job as of now. Gardner Johnson at safety was a little bit of a curious free agent signing. It looked like he was headed back to Philadelphia, and that didn't unfold, so here he is in Detroit. Really versatile chess piece, can play in the box, deep or in the slot. I think that versatility and, the dog mentality, which matches Dan Campbell perfectly, probably overstates Gardner Johnson's actual ability. Kirby Joseph will start at the other safety spot, 3rd-round rookie last season, got thrown into the fire, almost 900 snaps, solid production. Hit the rookie wall late. We'll see what Emmanuel Mosley brings to the table on the PUP list as of now, but a veteran corner with proven plus production would not shock me if that, once he comes back healthy after a few weeks, if he ends up taking over the cornerback 2 starting job there. Linebacker group needs Jack Campbell to be the guy early if that unit's going to make a leap. Shocked Alex Anzalone was extended and given a raise. Liability and coverage, poor tackler, 4 straight seasons below replacement level. Malcolm Rodriguez was a tackling machine at Oklahoma State. We loved watching him play, and he was kind of the darling of Hard Knocks. Let's see if he makes that year 2 leap, more of a downhill thumper. And then Derek Barnes is in the mix to get some reps as well. Made a big leap from his first to second season. The defensive line has to be better, though. I mean, Detroit was 25th in pass rush win rate against a bottom 7 schedule of pass protecting offensive lines last season. Hutchinson has apparently taken the next step from the guys I speak to that were at the joint Giants-Lions practices last week. Would be great to see Hutchinson's pressure rate number increase a little bit. The total number looks really good, but just a 9% pressure rate on pass rush snaps as a rookie was solid in coverage. Hutchinson set the edge extremely well. And then, kind of the wild card here is James Houston. I would think he's going to see more snaps this season. He was called up from the practice squad in Week 12 last season. He talked about quitting football because his entire life he's been overlooked. He's always performed extremely well when given a chance. He just thought Detroit wasn't giving him a chance. But as soon as he got thrown into the fire there in that I believe it was Week 12 against Buffalo, he had more than an 18% pressure rate on pass rush snaps the final 7 games of the season. James Kaminsky, a versatile chess piece, can play inside or out, solid player. Past that trio, I'm not sure what the Lions have up front. Josh Pascal was, the second round edge out of Kentucky, dealt with melanoma. He's healthy now. Hopefully, he kind of starts producing a little bit. Charles Harris was, the bust the Miami Dolphins took early ages ago. Relatively big 2021 season out of absolute nowhere and then came back to earth last season. There's been a huge emphasis this offseason from Dan Campbell on stopping the run, which makes sense when you look at some of these numbers. Detroit was 29th in rushing success rate allowed, 27th in EPA per rush allowed, and 26th in run stop win rate. Surrendered over 5.2 yards a carry. I mean, the Lions were just, flat out bullied on the inside last year. The D tackle group doesn't have much depth. I am hearing that the 3rd round rookie, Broderick Martin, is going to play lots of snaps this season. Aleem McNeil did improve from year 1 to year 2. Isaiah Buggs isn't playable for me, but had over 750 snaps last season. Benito Jones was an undrafted free agent in 2020. Now he's heading into season 3 below replacement level. So you're basically relying on Aleem McNeil making that surge in year 3 and a rookie in Broderick Martin, because what's behind those two doesn't leave much to be desired. There's, to me, still a talent void on defense, but if, Hutch takes that next step, Houston plays like he did last season with extended snaps. Jack Campbell is as advertised in the middle, and the schedule of offenses is one of the 10 easiest. This could be a Lions defense that, literally and figuratively fights to be average. We know they play hard, and energy and effort goes a long way on the defensive side of the ball.
When you look at this Lions team overall, we know what market expectations are. We know what their price is to win the division. Schedule-wise, we're going to get a look at them right out of the chute against the defending Super Bowl champions, against the Kansas City Chiefs. And a unique scheduling anomaly, they're going to play 3 games on Thursdays. 2 of those 3 games will come against the Green Bay Packers, including the traditional time slot on Thanksgiving. But this is a group, Payne, that may not be used to handling prosperity. It's going to have a target on their back in the division from the Bears, the Vikings, and the Lions. When you look at what's presented in front of them, after you look at the offensive and defensive capabilities, strengths, weaknesses, etc., how do you assess the Lions' true prospects for the season?
Yeah, they're not for me.
No, I mean
that's as easy as I can put it. Right? In terms of the market,
yeah.
They're not for me.
No, look.
We'll see ultimately what unfolds week 1. Certainly, you probably get the Chiefs at the best possible time, in week 1 if you're going to play a team like that. And ultimately, that's what I was saying offensively, right? When you look at Jared Goff's splits against, good teams, bad teams. Now, the Chiefs aren't going to have a top 10 defense, but that's certainly one of those teams that you go out and beat week 1 and everyone starts to realize, hey, you're for real. You can compete against the best. But in terms of market pricing, where you have to win 10 games to go over your win total, and you're priced as a division favorite, to me it feels more of a byproduct of the NFC and the NFC North than it does maybe Detroit's team profile.
No, and I think it's a great way to put it. I mean, as we've talked about and we try and reiterate on each and every one of these preview shows, it's not about mainstream media and how they view some of these teams, who can get over the hump, who can be the darlings, but more importantly, how they're being priced in the betting market. When you look at the Lions, we've already seen them come off of the 7, a game we'll break down in great detail when they make that opening week trip to Arrowhead. But you look over the first 8 games, this is a team that projects to be an underdog of more than a field goal only twice at Kansas City and most likely at Baltimore in week 7. So the opportunity is there for the Lions to start quickly. We'll see if they're able to handle a little bit of prosperity where they go from being the hunters to suddenly being the hunted, especially within their own division. You can follow.
And I mentioned it, right? Like that's internally, these are all the things Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn are specifically saying. Like, it's great that we've shown this improvement, but we know internally, like, we got to get over the hump now. And we understand that the hype is there and the pressure is there. So it is a little bit of a different dichotomy there. But, just kind of, again, overarching, the Lions are substantially better than they've been for years. And a lot of that, when you look at their pricing in the market, is basically what they're up against in this division. This probably, obviously have the NFC South. Like this to me is not the greatest division, and that's evident by some of the Lions' pricing.
It is a long-suffering fan base that would like to hang their hat on a little bit of prosperity. We'll see if they can live up to some of those preseason expectations. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, as always, for all things Bet the Board, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And if you haven't already done so, I encourage you guys to sign up for the Bet the Board weekly football newsletter. All sorts of great information readily available there Friday mornings, delivered right to you. And it serves as a reminder if you happen to miss one of or two of our NFL podcasts, the college show, or anything else that we're doing throughout the course of the season. We know lives get busy, even for those most diehard football fans. So that's the perfect way to make sure that you stay in tune with all of the great edges that we'll provide for you throughout the course of the fall. On to the third team in the division, Payne. That would be the Green Bay Packers. Their win total 7.5. Shaded to the over, right around minus $1.30. We'll kind of call the market consensus. Their price to win the division, a shade less than 4-1, depending on the book, and a little bit of uncharted territory as far as odds to win the NFC and the Super Bowl, 25-1 or thereabouts, and a price just shy of 70-1 if they're going to win the top prize in the NFL. Green Bay missed the playoffs last year, ending a 3-year run of division titles. On top of that, it did bring a streak of 3 straight 13-win seasons to an end as well. That was a feat no other NFL team had accomplished before then. It does, of course, come with a little bit of noise knowing we play a 17-game schedule. You watch the Green Bay Packers against Cincinnati Bengals in their first preseason game. There were a lot of things that I can see why Packers fans are optimistic. Obviously, not indicative of exactly what the Jordan Love experience will look like. But, this is a group that played with one of the slowest paces in the NFL last year, even with a veteran in Aaron Rodgers. That can be a blessing and a curse. This was a group that struggled mightily in terms of scoring touchdowns in goal-to-go situations. Gone is Aaron Rodgers under center. In steps Jordan Love. The young receivers have a year of seasoning under their belt. The running back room looks very similar, with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones set to take on their responsibilities. And if there's something to be excited about that shows a little bit of continuity for this Packers team offensively, it's if they can stay healthy on the offensive line. You have a veteran building block, which can be the best friend to a young quarterback who's about to become the face of one of the league's more preeminent franchises.
I think talking about the transition from Rodgers to Love is where every Packers offensive preview has to start. And I've had this conversation with so many people now, and it's very clear the proper practice is, gauging what the 2023 Jordan Love can be versus what the 2022 Aaron Rodgers was. That's the proper comp. We're not comparing what Jordan Love looked like in 2021 against the Chiefs versus MVP Aaron Rodgers. And
where's the fun in that?
Yeah, I think the reality is a combination of not being 100% committed to Green Bay anymore, a broken thumb on his throwing hand, living life without Devontae Adams, kind of all contributed to Aaron Rodgers being quarterback 20 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation last season. There were 23 quarterbacks that had at least 125 dropbacks where the offensive line kept them completely clean. Rodgers graded out 15th from a clean pocket. So it wasn't really a good season for Aaron Rodgers. And I think what we know is this, because there's not a lot of data, there's not a ton of sample size here, but Jordan Love's talent and pedigree is certainly off the charts, right? All the measurables, first round pick, he's 6'4", 220, can run 4.6, has a big arm. He's been in Matt LaFleur's system for 4 years now. The offense is finally going to be catered specifically to Jordan Love's skill set. And then there's the tea leaves, right? I mean, Packers beat writers, if you've been following this multiple seasons now and taking notes, right, they've been more optimistic and positive about Jordan Love every offseason camp he's had. The Packers also gave Jordan Love an extension with a boost in pay. And Green Bay hasn't signed a veteran quarterback with experience behind Jordan Love.
John Clifford, baby. If all else fails, default to the fifth-year quarterback out of Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, was it 5 years? It felt like 6 or 7.
I think he started for 5 years. He might have actually been on campus for 9 like Van Wilder.
We were actually always higher on Sean Clifford than Market.
True, that is for sure.
It was good to see him with a very, very nice preseason performance there. But I think, that was important to throw out there so everyone knows the proper way to gauge Jordan Love this season, and that's relative to Aaron Rodgers' 2022 season. We know how talented Jordan Love is, and now there's multiple indicators and tea leaves there that suggest this guy could be a little bit better than perception. And we know, and you hinted at it at the top, what's surrounding Jordan Love is pretty solid. I'm going to preference this, for now. David Bakhtiari is the starting left tackle.
That's subject to change before week 1. I mean, I think it's right around to pick him if he'll actually be the starter when they take on the Bears at Soldier Field.
I know the Jets are trying to trade for him, but for now, Bakhtiari is that guy. And the reason, we'll see the Dwayne Brown status of the Jets. There's at least some incentive, you would think, not a lot, right? Because the Packers' focus is winning this year, is helping Jordan Love. But if you were to get the right deal for Bakhtiari, who's shown that tendency of injury history, if Aaron Rodgers is to play 65% of snaps, that locks it in to a first-round pick. So also keeping Aaron Rodgers healthy this season is paramount for Green Bay. So, there's a tiny little of incentive if you were to move off Bakhtiari that you would trade him to the Jets. Now, there's no mystery about Bakhtiari's injuries, but he's only 31. It's shocking. Like when we talk about the guy like he's like 38.
I was going to go 52, but 38 sounds better.
He's one of the league's best pass protecting tackles when he's out there. And if you've read some quotes from Bakhtiari just like within the last couple of days, he came out and said, "This is the best effing camp I've ever had. On days they work me, it's intense, but the running joke is I'm a Lamborghini. They take me out during the week on the highway to make sure everything is running fine. Then they put me back in the garage until Sundays. That's the plan." So, I think, he's probably feeling better than he has the last few seasons. That's for sure. Elkington Jenkins at left guard, premier player. Center Josh Myers took a big step in pass protection from his rookie to sophomore year. Hopefully, the second-round pick can improve in run blocking this year. John Runyon heading into year 4. He's improved each season as a pass blocker. And then Zach Tom played almost 500 snaps as a rookie, graded out extremely well as a pass blocker, and everything in the world was thrown at Tom. I mean, he played 2 games at left guard, 5 at left tackle, 2 at right tackle, and now his home is right tackle. He can kind of perfect one position. So if the Packers O-line stays healthy, the talent is plentiful. I mean, last season, the Packers O-line finished top 10 in both pass block and run block win rate, and now we're projecting one of the easiest schedules of pass rush defenses. That's huge for Jordan Love, right? If he's not playing under duress. The Packers as a whole project to face the very easiest schedule of passing defenses as well, which again, not only big for Love, but those young receivers that you mentioned that were just scratching the surface. Christian Watson, I mean, he flashed in a big way as a rookie, 2.3 yards per route run. Quarterbacks had a 123 passer rating when they targeted Watson. That was the second best rate among qualifying receivers. Watson, we know, right? Runs 4.3, has a large catch radius, and I think the real positive, not a single drop the final 5 games of the season. So that was big to see. Jordan Love has great chemistry with Romeo Doubs. Found him in the back of the end zone during the preseason. I've heard that basically all camp, that those two are in lockstep, right? And, Dobbs just needs to be a little bit more consistent. He was thrown into the fire early, actually was getting more praise than Christian Watson early in the season. Played well the first 3 weeks, kind of hit that rookie wall, then picked it up down the stretch against Buffalo and Detroit and LA and Miami, and I think showed pretty well against Minnesota as well. Jaden Reed was taken in round 2. Torrey is likely going to get some burn as well. But as a whole, receiver group has to be better. Packers had the 7th most drop passes last season. I think those young kids improve. And then, we've kind of said this a couple times now, that the tight end position is very tough to translate from college to the NFL. That transition is just very, very tough on rookies. But Luke Musgrave, by all accounts, is the real deal. One of Jordan Love's favorite targets. Going to have a big role as a rookie. Despite that transition, Green Bay has a nice, thunder and lightning duo with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, both graded out top 10 in defensive adjusted value over average running backs. I think the value that Aaron Jones brings to the pass game is huge as well. 4th in EPA per touch among qualifying running backs. So that's a nice little safety blanket for Jordan Love. And then you just look like on top of the easy schedule of defenses, you hit it perfectly. You're going to see that positive regression in the red zone. Green Bay was bottom 10 in the league last year in red zone efficiency, had the 2nd worst turnover rate inside the 10-yard line. If Matt LaFleur ups his rate of early down throws and makes life easier on Jordan Love with some easier throws, right? I think projecting what Jordan Love can be this season certainly has this very large delta, right? Like if you told me, hey, Jordan Love against a soft schedule and Matt LaFleur helping him a little bit more by more throws and early downs, that he can finish top 8 in EPA per dropback, I probably wouldn't argue with you. If you said 21st, I wouldn't argue with you. The difference is, right, if Jordan Love finishes 21st in EPA per dropback, which is where Aaron Rodgers ended last season, the market projected the Packers to win 11 games last season. This year, it's 7.5. And you kind of map this out even further. Like in 2021, the Packers win total at one point was 13.5. Devontae Adams leaves. The Packers win total in 2022 was 11. Now we're at 7.5 heading into the season. With this schedule, it just feels like we've likely reached the Packers floor price here.
Well, you talk a little bit about the offense, and of course that's going to grab headlines for a franchise that has basically gone from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers for the better part of 30 years at the quarterback position. But defensively, this was a group that I think we were a little bit higher on than most last season coming into it based on some of the pieces. And Joe Barry in his 2nd season really didn't get the most out of them. I'm quite frankly surprised that there wasn't more talk about Joe Barry not being retained on this side of the ball. And Matt LaFleur has said he wants to see a more aggressive defense, and that's coming from a group that finished last year with a top 10 blitz rate. There are some injuries that are worth highlighting. I know the good doc will touch on that when we wrap up our 4 teams about some key contributors there. But this is a franchise that's made a concerted effort to raise its overall defensive profile. 7 of the 8 picks that Brian Gutekunst has made as a GM in the first round have all been on defense. Lucas Van Ness is the next one to get named to that list after they picked a tandem of Georgia teammates in 2022. But this was a group Payne last year that was porous against the run. The secondary, with the exception of Jair Alexander when he was healthy, didn't live up to some of that advanced billing, and more may be asked of the stop unit, especially if there are some growing pains with Jordan Love taking over under center.
Green Bay's organization has a reputation for stubborn loyalty. But like you, I'm surprised Joe Barry's getting a 3rd season as DC. It felt like, hey, Adams left last offseason. Rodgers is gone too. Let's kind of fix the other issues and reset. But that didn't happen. And Joe Barry's back. He's had two of the most underachieving defenses relative to talent back-to-back years. I mean, surface level, the Packers have been 20th and 22nd in schedule-adjusted defensive efficiency in both of Barry's seasons. But the underlying metrics are even worse. You know, take every single defense for the last 2 seasons. Green Bay is 29th in EPA allowed on early downs the first 3 quarters. And the past 2 seasons, you kind of mentioned that talent. Joe Barry's had 7 first-round picks on his defense to work with. And then you throw in Lucas Van Ness this year, it makes 8, and Preston Smith was the 38th overall pick. So just gobs of talent to work with. And it's really fair to say there isn't a coordinator in the NFL the last 2 seasons that's done less with more when looking at talent relative to production. There is a little bit of a glimmer of hope here. If you look at Green Bay's defense and how it trended, it was really good the final 5 games last year. It was really the best stretch of defensive play under Joe Barry. From week 13 onward, Packers defense was 3rd in schedule-adjusted efficiency. The Packers head into this season, right, projected to face a bottom 7 schedule of offenses. Matt LaFleur is allowing Joe Barry to call games from the coach's box. He tried it in the preseason opener against Cincinnati, liked it. So as of now, it looks like Joe Barry's moving from the sideline to the coach's box. Let's kind of monitor that to see if that's the case, but they tested it out against the Bengals. It's kind of like this. It's less emotional being in the box than on the sideline. You got better vantage points, can see everything going on. There's also a better relationship between Joe Barry and the players. During exit interviews last season, Joe Barry apparently had a meeting with the entire defense and asked what they wanted, and everyone said tighter, more aggressive coverage. And so far in camp, that's what the Packers are doing defensively. So expect tighter coverage in the Packers secondary. And then, you know, as I said at the top, like there's just lots of Jimmies and Joes, right? Like 9 defenders all selected in the first 38 picks of their respective draft on this Packers defense. Up front, Kenny Clark, one of those guys. He's supposedly going to line up at end more this season when the Packers are in their base 3-4. TJ Slayton will be the nose tackle. Wyatt will be opposite Kenny Clark. Clark's coming off his worst season as a pro. So we're projecting positive regression there. Devontae Wyatt had his best game in Week 18, played only 200-ish snaps as a rookie, did so above replacement level. I think we see a leap from Wyatt. I know the transition from the people that I have spoken to was difficult going from the South to the Midwest, and you know Wyatt to this point has looked really good in camp. TJ Slayton, again, will get more snaps this season. He improved from rookie year to second year, should get that year 3 bump. I'm hearing the Packers are really exploring adding a veteran body for depth inside to pair with some of those rookies and Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden. And then you have Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith coming off the edge. Gary only played 9 games last season after tearing the ACL. Give that guy credit, right? I mean, he completely transformed his body. Todd, if you remember those conversations initially that rookie year, it's like, he doesn't really fit the system. But, you know, he worked on his body and now he's fitting, you know, the Packers system. His last 1,100 snaps over 2 seasons have been played at an elite level. 18% pressure rate on pass rush snaps, plus run defender. It looks like he's got a shot to play Week 1. Preston Smith is coming off his worst season since 2017. We're projecting positive regression there. Van Ness has started camp real slow. Word is they're not quite sure if he's going to be a year 1 contributor, but you do have Kingsley heading into his second season. Kingsley was forced into action as a rookie when Gary went down with that ACL, played almost 500 snaps. Linebacker room led by Devondre Campbell. He's kind of the quarterback of the Packers defense. The green dot didn't play to his shocking 2021 level, but missed 4 games due to injury last year. When he came back, wasn't quite the same playing through those injuries, but he had his second good season to the point where we can't call 2021 an anomaly anymore.
Yep.
Quay Walker, you know, is the guy Green Bay needs to have that sophomore surge. If you just throw on the tape, I mean, the speed and athleticism is off the charts, and that's why I think Quay was best getting after the quarterback and in coverage. If you look at some of those numbers, was a little bit of a liability against the run because he's undersized. My understanding is Quay Walker is going to be kept a little busier between snaps. this season to help stay focused and limit the emotional outburst that led to 2 in-game ejections. So what I'm hearing is they're going to move him around a little bit more between snaps. I would expect Quay to be a larger part of the manufactured pressures defensively. Secondary led by Jai Alexander, elite cover corner. He does prefer playing tighter coverage. Again, like expect more man and less zone in the back. Rasul Douglas followed up his great 2021 season with another good year. We should get a better version of Rasul Douglas because Joe Barry is moving him back outside where he's most comfortable. Looks like Nixon in the slot. Stokes is a backup when he returns from injury. Safety position is concerning to me. Darnell Savage has had 2 horrific seasons back-to-back after playing great in 2020 and flashing as a rookie. Savage, if you remember, was kind of benched at one point last year. I mean, Green Bay tried everything with him. Free safety, strong safety, slot corner, you name it.
Try him at kicker. Maybe that'll help.
Rudy Ford is back after grading out the Packers' 4th best defender last season. I'm hearing Jonathan Owens has ran with the first team a ton during camp. So Green Bay has 3 options at safety. Just need 2 of them to work. But I look at the talent. Joe Barry knows the pressure's on. It's a make or break year for him. More versatility up front, tighter coverage in the back, soft schedule, more emphasis on leading the team now that Aaron Rodgers is gone. I think the Packers defense is capable of fighting to be a top 10 defense. Again, we saw down the stretch final 5 weeks, they were 3rd last year. And I think, fighting to be that top 10 defense, got to be better than average. But if you can fight to be around, that 11 to 7 range right in there, that's probably got to happen for Joe Barry to keep his job.
Look, these are the kind of teams that I think anybody who has been in this business long enough oftentimes finds the most intriguing because the market is caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of trying to evaluate what the transition will look like at the most valuable position, not just in the NFL, but in all of pro sports at starting quarterback. When you go from a known commodity and a first ballot Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, who at least had a few years to sit in the system. And the one thing I'll say that's not quite an apples to apples comparison, and you never like to take too much out of a preseason game. You watch Jordan Love and all the questions people have about him taking over and the command of the offense and the systems against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's a far cry when you see a trio of rookie quarterbacks and Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and of course, Bryce Young adjusting to life at the NFL level. Sometimes sitting and learning, having a chance to get your feet wet in limited sample sizes can pay dividends, but this isn't a roster completely devoid of talent by any stretch of the imagination. And I think you talking about the defense, the players that are there that have to take the next step forward, makes Green Bay one of the more intriguing teams to watch, and more importantly, how the market will respond to them on a week-in, week-out standpoint.
Yeah. And potentially more on the Packers here in the next 20 minutes.
All right, well, nice little teaser there, but we have one team still to get to, and that, of course, would be the Minnesota Vikings, who went well above and beyond, exceeding expectations a season ago with their gaudy win total, despite a point differential that had people looking to try and run over men, women, and children to fade them every time they stepped up in class. But as a result, you've seen the betting market respond accordingly. The Vikings win total, 8.5, shaded to the over. They find themselves second favorites behind the Detroit Lions to win the division at a price just shy of 3-1. And if you're looking big picture-wise, to win the Super Bowl, less than 50-1 in that 45 to 48 range, and a tick below 20-1 to win the conference. And as far as the 13 games the Vikings won last year, they went flying over their win total, but obviously the win-loss record wasn't supported by the scoring margins, drew pro money against them nearly every single week down the stretch. They were the first team since at least 1990 to win double-digit games, despite trailing by over 70 combined points entering the fourth quarter in their games. There was no single 60-minute performance or sample size that encapsulated the Vikings season more than what we saw against the Indianapolis Colts, where they had to erase a 33-0 deficit. 9 of the Vikings' victories were comebacks in which they trailed at halftime. This is a team that went 11-0 in one-score games in Coach O'Connell's first season. The perfect honeymoon campaign for a first-year head coach. But Payne, things are going to be a little bit more difficult. And when you look at Kirk Cousins' year-over-year numbers, this is a quarterback that's regressed in each of the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very tough team to gauge again, and we kind of just rewind this. I believe in 2021 we went over the Vikings win total.
I don't want to talk about that.
And didn't. No, but my point here is it evened out, right? Because we went over the Vikings win total last year.
True.
And probably shouldn't have won it. So it ended up evening out. I think it's very obvious, right? Minnesota wasn't a 13-win football team last season despite the win-loss column. And the Pythag had the Vikings winning a shade more than 8. If football games were only 3 quarters, Minnesota would have finished 7-10. The Vikings' fourth quarter win share was also in line with that Pythag number, shade over 8. But you get to 13 wins by going 11-0 in 1-score games, and you win both overtime games, and then you have the largest comeback in NFL history, and then one of the healthiest offenses in the NFL, and that was the overachievement recipe for Minnesota last year. But I was a little disappointed by Kevin O'Connell's offense in year one. It felt like there was an advantage there in the unknown of being a first-time offensive-minded head coach, and all we got was a watered-down Sean McVay offense, right? Like, if McVay's offense is an original Picasso, Kevin O'Connell's was a replica. And you just look at the entire overarching offense, 20th in schedule-adjusted efficiency. You mentioned Kirk Cousins' regression. It was very clear that he took a step back in Kevin O'Connell's system. The counting stats looked good because Minnesota trailed in so many games. But if you look at the actual numbers, Kirk Cousins finished 26th out of 32 qualifying quarterbacks in adjusted EPA the first 3 quarters. Cousins was 22nd in EPA from a clean pocket. Cousins was 3rd in 2021. So massive regression there from a clean pocket. When defenses, aren't able to get to you, that's when you have to do damage and make them pay. Instead, Kirk Cousins threw 10 picks from a clean pocket. And, now Cousins has some added pressure this season. The Vikings, can move on from him after this year. And all of the remaining years on Kirk Cousins' deal, if you look at them, are void years. And, if this season's any indication, Mensa has, been more than willing to move on from aging veterans and build for the future. So it's a big year for Kirk Cousins. I think the positive is getting a little bit more help this year. I mean, Justin Jefferson, we know what he is. It's the best 3-year start to a career at the receiver position in NFL history. Most receiving yards the first 3 seasons of a career, most receptions, averaging, over 2.6 yards per route run for his career. And if you look over the last 3 years, just collection of grade, he's been the best receiver. And, now obviously it's Cousins' favorite target, but he's going to be double teamed less. I mean, you look at some of the games last year, Justin Jefferson was getting double teamed at over an 80% clip in some of these games. And I think Mensa recognized that and went out and drafted Jordan Addison in round 1. He's a little bit undersized. That's why he dipped a little bit. Addison, to this point, is flash in camp. I think he's going to be open a bunch on the backside of plays. Has the potential to be an impact player right away. KJ Osborne is solid. And then, Cousins has TJ Hawkinson for a full season. And Hawk is coming off a season where, he had the most yards per route run of his career. And now you're looking at a schedule of passing defenses that goes from second toughest to below average. So, you're expecting an offensive surge here with some of these added weapons. And I think, the other thing here is, the offseason story for the Vikings, if you've kind of followed this a little bit, has been a little bit more in the run support area, like just a huge emphasis on being more physical. Minnesota was 6th in pass rate over expectation last season, but you kind of listen to the O-line coach, Chris Cupper, and then even Kevin O'Connell. They've talked about adopting more of a physical running game strategy. They want to be able to run when they see light boxes. I don't know if it's going to work, but they're at least, you can see things, right? Like having a plan and kind of seeing the vision and then seeing how they go and attack that. Like Minnesota went out and they signed a blocking tight end in Josh Oliver, one of the better pass blocking tight ends last season. They re-sign, CJ Ham to play fullback. So for me, I hope it's not lining up in heavier formations as the answer to the improved running, but it's just being more efficient when the opportunity presents itself. The O-line has to play better. Running backs have to be better. I mean, the advantage Minnesota had last year was lining up in 3 wide receiver sets on early downs, which they did at a top 10 rate in the league. And then on top of that, having Justin Jefferson strike fair to where defenses wouldn't dare load the box. And those were the looks Minnesota had last season, right? The Vikings saw the 5th lowest rate of loaded boxes in the league. They also faced the 5th easiest schedule of run defenses, but somehow The O-line was just 25th in line yards created because the interior of the line was so bad. And it resulted in 26% of the Vikings running plays to go for 0 or negative yards, highest rate in the league. So you need this offensive line just to be better. I like what they have at tackle. I mean, Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill were actually the best tackle tandem in the NFL last season. Minnesota was the only team in the league to have 2 tackles grade out in the top 10 among 139 tackles that played last season. But inside, with Ezra Cleveland and Garrett Bradbury and the rookie Ed Ingram, they weren't very good. And, the run game improvement has to happen up front. I'm also not in love with the Vikings running back room. I'll just be honest. Like, I know everyone's hoping for Alexander Mattison to be the guy, and he's dealing with a little bit of an injury, but he's positioned to be the bell cow, right? He hasn't been very good. Mattison is in the 9th percentile among qualifying running backs in yards gained before contact per rush over the last 2 seasons. Behind Mattison is a bunch of unproven kids like, Keene and Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler showed well in the preseason. I think he might have a crack at some carries this year. We'll see what that, leads to. A little bit more burstier than Mattison, but the running back room is a question mark. I think the good news for Minnesota in the ground game they project to face the easiest schedule of run defenses. You kind of just look at this overarching, right? Like contract year for Cousins, year 2 in O'Connell's system, better weapons, easier schedule. Like, Minnesota better push towards being a top 10 schedule adjusted offense, or it's going to be a really, really disappointing season.
Tell you one running back I don't want to see get touches in big-time NFL games would be Dwayne McBride. You can't be a battering ram at this particular level. You mentioned Ty Chandler, though, who did show a little bit of upside there, and we'll see exactly how that running back room sorts itself out. Defensively for the Minnesota Vikings, gone is Ed Donatel at defensive coordinator. In comes Brian Flores. And given the personnel, the Vikings showed a 3-safety look in their preseason opener against the Seahawks. A little bit unusual if you want to tip your hand in terms of some of the different ways that you may be experiencing how you're going to play, given some of the personnel challenges. But Payne, this was a defense that really struggled for stretches last year. Ranked in the bottom 5 for both total defense and scoring defense, finished 27th in points per drive allowed. The defensive line actually played well in spurts if we're looking to try and identify some strengths, but there are a lot more concerns about this group defensively, both in their secondary, the linebacking core, trying to figure out exactly what they're going to look like this year with a new voice calling the plays.
Lots of turnover, to your point, right? I mean, Ed Donatel was a one-and-done DC. More than half the Vikings' defensive starters are gone. Just a terrible defensive season for Minnesota overall. 27th in schedule-adjusted efficiency. Dead last, 32nd in EPA per play on early downs the first 3 quarters. The only saving grace were the variance downs. Minnesota was 3rd in success rate allowed on 3rd and 4th down combined. In comes Brian Flores. So what you are going to see and expect is an immediate change in scheme and philosophy. Flores runs a 3-4 defense that likes to be multiple and kind of morph into a 4-3 at times. The very first thing, if you're a Vikings fan, you'll notice is a massive uptick in aggression. Brian Flores is one of the most blitz-heavy defensive minds, especially when kind of, given carte blanche, which, you look at, his final 2 seasons in Miami, Flores blitzed at the 2nd highest rate in the league. Lots of press coverage on the back end. You're going to see corners trying to reroute receivers off the line. Defensive players apparently are enjoying the scheme shift, right? If you've read the quotes, if you've seen the pressers, there's lots of positivity and smiles on faces. It's not just putting on a show and being PC. But the transition, might take some time, and unfortunately the Vikings are projected to face a top 3 schedule of offenses in the NFL. So the transition to a new scheme could be a little more difficult. There's a couple horses on defense. Danielle Hunter stayed healthy last year, played nearly 1,000 snaps, had his 2nd best season as a pro. Not quite as good as that historic 2019 season, but had a 13% pressure rate on pass rush snaps, and he was a plus edge setter. The big splash move this offseason was signing Marcus Davenport. 5 straight seasons of really good play in New Orleans, 13% career pressure rate on pass rush snaps. I think the hope is, right, that Davenport can kind of transition to being an every down edge. We saw that transition, right, with another former Saints defensive end and Trey Hendrickson making that move to Cincinnati, where now he's playing, in the mid 60% range of snaps. So that's the hope for Davenport, is he can get there as well. He's only eclipsed 500 snaps in one season. Harrison Phillips is back, somewhat of a contract year. Phillips, damn good run defender, finished top 10 in run stop win rate during the 2021 season, and then had a 17% tackle rate on run snaps last year. Tonga was a 7th round pick in 2021, played 300 snaps as a sophomore. Damn good run stuffer, 20% tackle rate on run snaps. But that number could have been massive because Tonga missed 16% of tackles. So clean that up a little bit and he could be a force inside. Veteran Dean Lowry signs with Minnesota in free agency. He's familiar with this division, spent 7 years in Green Bay. The first 3 were really good, but a replacement level player the last 4. But another, 6'6", 300-pound body that, is nice to have inside when you're facing one of the toughest run schedules in the NFL. You mentioned Eric Kendricks. He's a guy that's gone, so Jordan Hicks is leading the way. Hicks was great as a box linebacker last season. Best run defending season he's had as a pro. Just a 6% missed tackle rate, sprinkled in some pressure, but he was a massive liability in coverage. Hicks' running mate is really up for grabs right now. You mentioned the 3 safety look. So Flores runs a lot of times he likes it to be a 4-2-5. You have Asamoah, who was a 3rd-round rookie out of Oklahoma, played only 121 snaps, but was great in coverage. Ivan Pace Jr., the rookie from Cincinnati, has had a fantastic camp to the point where he's getting a good amount of first-team looks. So there are options at linebacker past Hicks. They're younger guys. Secondary is really interesting to me. Harrison Smith is back. Going to be 35 in February, coming off his worst season. That's the game we play almost, right? Is when you're projecting player performance. It's like, was that just variance and poor scheme, or is Harrison Smith, getting old? Cameron Bynum is heading into year 3, had a great rookie season. Last year played over 1,200 snaps, converted from slot corner to safety, was really good against the run, but a disaster in coverage. Byron Murphy was the second big splash signing on defense. I think most know my feelings on Murphy. He's not a true number 1 corner, replacement level guy the first 4 seasons. Now he's transitioning away from the West Coast, was born in Scottsdale, played 4 years at Washington, played 4 years for the Cardinals. Let's see how kind of that looks like. You have a Caleb Evans, was a 4th-round rookie last season. He's penciled in to start opposite Murphy. Did not have a good rookie season, struggled in coverage, and dealt with 3 concussions as well. Andrew Booth Jr. was a 2nd-round pick last season, tore his meniscus, but prior to that was virtually unplayable. Lewis Seen was the Vikings' 1st-round pick last season, suffered a horrible broken leg. And then you have Mekhi Blackman is a 3rd-round rookie in line for some snaps. So there's a lot of guys here that I would say create a ton of variance. Does Harrison Smith return to form? Does Byron Murphy ever play to the contract and the perception? Do the young guys return from injury and take that next step under a better defensive mind? I think we'll see improvement in the top line number. We're projecting Minnesota to finish better than 27th in schedule adjusted defensive efficiency. But the Vikings aren't like trotting out a top 10 defense like it's 2019, despite some of the optimism from players. I think this was, again, one of the tougher teams to kind of project for us because about all the luck and the variance from last year.
So does the betting market.
So does the betting market. And, again, we just keep coming back to this point. Like, the division isn't stockpiled with a ton of teams that are great. The NFC just, isn't great. And now it's like year 2 of an offense and the weapons are better. And Kirk Cousins isn't a contract year. So, we're playing for a lot. The schedule of defenses aren't great. And it's like we have an adult in the room on defense now with Brian Flores, regardless of how he left Miami and all the bullshit that went on there. Like, he's a better defensive coordinator than Ed Donatel. And, so it's like the odds of being better than 27th defensively is really good. So this is a very tough team for me to gauge.
This is a team that I like to say there are a variety of conflicting indicators in terms of trying to figure out how you normalize some of the variance from last season. You talked about how the defense will get better, but if the offense doesn't live with a horseshoe up their ass, then look, what goes up must come down, but it's reflected in the betting market. If this win total is 10.5, it's a much different discussion to have than where they're currently priced at 8.5. They don't have the same lofty expectations, and if anything, they may be flying a little bit under the radar because people were so enamored with trying to fade them down the stretch last year that we'll see exactly how they perform. The schedule will get a pretty good indication right out of the gates as they open up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home, but have a short week to go and play the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles, a team that they struggled mightily with a season ago as Kirk Cousins threw countless picks in that particular football game.
I'm aware. We had the over.
Oh, I know, and it started off like a house on fire, and then the sand ticked through the hourglass faster than any football game I've ever watched in the second half, as Cousins couldn't get us within 2 scores to at least force Philadelphia to put their foot back on the accelerator. But, Payne, we don't cry over spilled milk for a good NFL season. 4 teams in the NFC North that'll be interesting to watch and how the market responds to them on a week-to-week basis. But before we talk about some of the actionable elements that we've identified with this quartet of teams, we welcome in Deepak Shona, someone you can follow on Twitter at SportMDAnalysis, to break down all the key injuries that he's following, at least early on in camp, that may have been lingering from the end of the 2022 season.
Are you injured or are you hurt?
When injuries occur in the NFL, you need someone to call on.
If you're hurt, you can still play. If you're injured, you can't.
Let's check in with Dr. Deepak Chona, Stanford and Harvard-trained orthopedic sports surgeon and founder of Sports Med Analytics, the industry leader in data-driven injury analysis.
So are you hurt or are you injured?
All right, thanks guys. We do have a lot going on in the NFC North, so we will dive right in, starting with the Packers and starting with the biggest name, Rashawn Gary. Now, he injured his ACL week 9 of last year. He'll be about 11 months post-op, which is right around average for the return in around the league for ACLs. Keep in mind, though, that pass rush is a little bit more of a difficult position to return to based on both return timelines and also the performance hit after players do return tends to be pretty significant. However, with Gary, he is about as elite as it gets. He's a 95th percentile athlete based on the important metrics that we look at from the combine. And for that reason, we do anticipate him being able to play as a high-level performer, especially towards the second half of the season. We do think the first 4 to 6 weeks you will see about 85% of himself and ramping up over the course of that time. Now, we have him listed as about a 55% chance of playing week 1, and that's more or less a toss-up. But as the season goes on, we do expect you will see a stronger and stronger player. And then we have Jair Alexander. Now, he has a groin issue that is reportedly minor. We don't anticipate this one causing him much missed time, but it's noteworthy because he did have a groin strain last year and it did cost him 1 game. So we hope that this is not a recurrence of that, but that small fact does increase the risk over the course of the year. And then we have also on the Packers, Eric Stokes. Now, defensive back, coming back from a Lisfranc that he suffered in November, that is a tough position to come back from a Lisfranc for. The Lisfranc is involved in pushing off in the midfoot area, and as a defensive back, you're constantly in that position, pushing off of the midfoot and reacting. So we do anticipate him probably missing week 1 and probably coming back around week 4 to 6 range. He will likely see a performance hit, but by the end of the year, you're probably looking at 90% of where he was at the end of last year. Then on the Lions, now not injured right now, but we have Jameson Williams to talk about. Last season was really a dud of a performance, but that should have been expected because he had a very late prior season ACL tear. Now, Jameson Williams, of course, he's going to miss some games for the suspension, but he is as elite of an athlete as it gets at the wide receiver position from a speed and explosiveness perspective. So we do anticipate seeing a much, much improved version of Jameson Williams, and we do think that last year was highly related to the injury dip. And then we have CJ Gardner-Johnson. Good news on him in the defensive backs for the Lions. Now, he was injured in camp, but he had a reassuring knee MRI, no structural damage per reports. So we'd expect him to be full go by week 1. No real increase in his risk here. And then we have on the Bears, Chase Claypool. Now, he's dealing with a hamstring issue. It's hard to know the severity yet. With that being said, the average hamstring during the season takes about 2 weeks, and during the preseason, they usually add 1 to 2 weeks to any of those timelines. So we don't anticipate seeing a ton of Chase Claypool out there over the next couple of weeks, but we still wouldn't necessarily be concerned about his availability for week 1 yet. Now, where this does raise his risk is in re-injury. These do have a tendency to be re-aggravated, about 10% in Claypool's case, but overall not yet worried about his availability for week 1. And then we have his teammate Darnell Mooney. He had an ankle fracture that was fixed, and he had a tightrope placed in November. That typically causes an 8-month performance dip, but Darnell Mooney will be back past that by week 1, so we do expect 100% of his pre-injury performance. And then also on the Bears, briefly, we have Tremaine Edmonds and DeMarcus Walker on the defensive side. Little info was released on either injury. Other than that, they are expected to be ready for week 1. And then on the Vikings, now we have Alexander Mattison, and this one caused some fantasy owners some distress, but it's reportedly only minor, and they're calling it just a lower body issue. He returned to practice pretty quickly, so it suggests that it's not a muscle strain, because those would tend to be rested for a little bit longer to prevent recurrence. So this one's not likely to carry forward much risk. And then next, we have Irv Smith. Now, another guy who's not dealing currently with an injury, but did have a high ankle fixed with surgery that he was able to briefly return from the playoffs last year for the very end, but he looked like a fraction of himself. Now, he's another case where that fraction of himself should be fully restored by week 1, and we do expect a good performance from him this year. And that's all we have for now, so we will catch you next time.
You know, it's always good, Payne, when we get Deepak on and there aren't super impactful injuries that he has to try and break down as we head into a fresh NFL slate. Rashawn Gary, no doubt, a player that you talked about and the impact he's had so far for the Green Bay Packers, if he can return at even 80 to 85% to try and help spearhead that defense and allow them to scratch the surface as Joe Barry is increasingly on the hot seat.
Yeah, that there wasn't many injuries of note in the NFC North that were going to impact teams this season. Hopefully, for all the teams and the players, everyone stays pretty much healthy. Was that the segue? Are we ready?
I mean, I think we can start with a drum roll. I mean, we can go all the
We don't really need one. We teased it earlier, and then you kind of led there with that team, and so I was like, is this it? Is this the time?
Is this it? Is this the grand finale? Is this where we get the 5-minute firework display of concurrent pyrotechnics?
There isn't going to be 5 minutes. Yeah, there isn't going to be 5 minutes. Let's just kind of get to it.
All right, best bet.
Best bet. There we go. We said it in the preview, and I think we probably spent close to 20 minutes on the Green Bay Packers. Again, every single team is time-stamped, so there's no reason to regurgitate everything again. But it just feels like at this price point of 7.5, you're buying a team at its absolute floor. And, again, you go back and see where the Packers were priced. It was 13.5 at one point in 2021 and 11 last year. And now we're at 7.5 heading into this year with, one of the easiest schedules in all of football. And I think you said it perfectly, is Jordan Love while this might be his, first time as a starter heading into the season, he's been in this system 4 years. And really what we're looking at isn't comparing, Jordan Love in 2023 to what Aaron Rodgers was his MVP seasons, but what Aaron Rodgers was last season in 2022. And that was, basically, bottom 10 quarterback. And so, if Jordan Love can even play to that level while the market is offering us a far better price, it just feels like that's too much value to pass up on the Green Bay Packers. So let's go over 7.5 wins. You can get it minus $1.20, minus $1.25 in that range. So I think that's probably the best way to go for a best bet with our NFC North podcast.
Every time we talk about the Green Bay Packers, I just replay the Jim Valvano speech where he was a coach at Rutgers and was quoting Vince Lombardi saying, if there's a couple of things that you can focus on this season, it's your family, your religion, and the Green Bay Packers. And the SB speech, it just always resonates with me, as ridiculous as that may sound. But that's always the one thing we talk about the Green Bay Packers and we preview the season. Comes back more so than images of Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers with Herculean feats in that particular regard. But all right, my friend.
I'm going to let you think about this for a second, too. And I know we're trying to wrap this up because this is now going to be the longest podcast we've done for a preview.
It is but it is.
I kind of envisioned it, right? When we talked about this, it was like, there's so much uncertainty within this division. You go down these wormholes trying to dive and find, more edges to uncover something, because a lot of times this is where some larger edges can come from when there's a lot of uncertainty. The irony in this is what? Think about the Green Bay Packers for us over the last 4 years of doing this podcast.
I know
Packers fans want to put our heads on a spit. We kept telling you they weren't a 13-win type team, and you were so pissed off at us. And finally, you understood that after the third year of underachieving in terms of Super Bowl goals. And now all of a sudden, we're sitting here proving to you that, hey, this is all about price. We don't actually hate your beloved Packers team.
Yeah, all is not lost, and all the regression that we had been anticipating for a couple seasons happened in 1 year, and there was no better way than to send Aaron Rodgers out of town with Green Bay falling flat on their face against the Detroit Lions in the regular season finale, where we were able to cash that dog ticket in that regard. But all is not lost in northern Wisconsin. Hopefully the Jordan Love era takes off as seamlessly as you can hope, with Aaron Rodgers off to hone his talents as a member of the New York Jets. We'll be back with you on Thursday. 4 divisions left to go. We'll knock them out one by one leading up to the start of the 2023 NFL season. For Payne Insider, I'm Todd Fuhrman. Best of luck with all of your preseason investments, and most importantly, when we talk about the NFC North with a Green Bay Packers regular season win total over the posted total in hand, we'll see you at the window.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.